Hello, and this is my review of the new 2025 Suzuki Swift Hybrid. The new Swift Hybrid was launched in the UK in early 2024, and while this new model might look quite different, it's actually sitting on the same platform as the previous third generation. And what's really nice to see too is that Suzuki has retained the all-grip four-wheel drive option. Around the front, the new Swift doesn't look as cutesy and friendly as the previous generation model. This new one is a bit more aggressive in its design. So for example, the grille here is a bit more pointy and this one is finished in gloss black. We will have also got the sensor bank located here, which is nicely well hidden. Got the Suzuki badge up here. We've also got these new larger headlights, which are a bit more angular in their design. And while this is sitting on the same platform as the previous model, this one is actually 4.6% more aerodynamic. And that's thanks to the wheel design and the front bumper, as well as some bits around the back. So that's a pretty good result. For the UK market, Suzuki is only offering this one engine option. Now this is a 1.2 litre petrol 3-cylinder, making 81 brake horsepower. Now just like the previous generation of Swift, this is used in conjunction with a mild hybrid system. And that system does a good job of cutting in and providing a bit more boost and power when the engine is incapable of doing so. For colours, there are actually quite a few to choose from. In fact, you can choose from 8 different solid colours, including orange, white, grey, cool yellow, black, silver, red and blue. If those solid colours aren't to your liking, you can choose to have a black roof, and that's combined with white, cool yellow, red and blue. The only downside is that while the Suzuki Swift is a relatively cheap car, the colours are on the expensive side. For example, all the solid colours apart from red are £600 and the red option is actually £700. And if you want the black roof combined with any other colours, that's £750 and the red one is £850. Around the back, the design of the new Swift is very simple in its approach. All we have is these little light clusters which protrude from the bodywork slightly, a slightly tinted rear window with a little rear wiper, and then a very slim and understated rear spoiler with an integrated brake light, and then Suzuki badge, Swift badge, hybrid badge, and then the rear camera. The placement of the rear camera looks a little bit strange, and on the old Swift, the bumper was a little bit higher up, and the rear camera was just underneath here, which looked a little bit better. On the new Swift, it has been put on the boot lid, which looks a little bit strange. So the boot lid opens up manually, which is not a problem. And then that reveals 265 litres of boot space, which is a really good and practical amount of space for the segment this car sits in. That's a really rectangular space, which means like things like pushchairs and suitcases should fit in no problem. It hasn't got a weird shape sort of at the sides and like some cars have. There are some little bag hooks and a little LED light. And then underneath the carpet floor, there is just enough space for a spare wheel, like a space saver. But from factory, this comes with a polystyrene piece with some tyre repair bits and pieces. Now, if we fold these seats down, that reveals 589 litres of boot space, and all you need to do is go each side of the car to do that. Now, as you can see, that space isn't completely flat. The Swift doesn't have a height adjustable load floor, so that means you're not going to be able to get it up and flush with the back of the seats. But as long as you can get things in and out relatively easily, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. In certain areas in the front, you can tell that the new Swift has been built to a certain price, which is no bad thing. So the things that don't matter as much, such as the door cards and this whole dashboard, is all hard plastic, which is common in the car industry. But the things that you touch day to day, like the seats, the gear stick and the steering wheel, are all really good quality. So this wheel, for example, is really nice to hold and really nice to use on long journeys, and all the buttons are really good quality. The seats, again, are really good quality, really spongy and really comfortable on long journeys. They've got really good lumbar support, which is quite rare in a small, cheap car. I also really love the cream on the dash. Most cars now have a really boring looking interior, especially cheaper cars. Now this one has black on the dash, with a dark silver piece here, more cream at the bottom and cream on this section. It makes it look a lot more interesting, I think. The thing that lets this car down, unfortunately, is the infotainment screen. Using the built-in software, so not using Apple CarPlay, is all really laggy. So trying to use the settings page, it all takes a long time to load, and it is a little bit frustrating to use at times. But most people are going to use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, which this car has, and it's wireless by default on all trims of the new Swift, which is really good to see. One aspect of the front interior, which Suzuki should be really proud of, is the climate control system. Other manufacturers, such as MG with the MG3, should take note of how well this has been implemented. It's so much better and so much more intuitive and safer to use than having all of this stuff on the touchscreen. So we've got a really nice and easy to use system down here. So there are some buttons for the recirculation, the air conditioning, the front demister, the rear demister, but also the fan speed on this knob here and the temperature too. Really, really simple and really well implemented. Also, we've got 3 USB ports, one USB-A for data, one USB-C for charging, and another USB-A for charging. There's also one traditional 12-volt socket as well. Also, in the front interior, we have 3 cup holders, and much like previous versions of the Swift, these are square in shape, and that can make some cups a little bit awkward to get in place. So there's 2 cup holders here and 1 cup holder there. Also, quite a rare thing to see in 2025 is a manual handbrake and also a 5-speed manual. You can also get the Swift in a CVT automatic gearbox if you want it. And this one, being the Ultra trim, we have 2 heated seats and the buttons for that are down here. Another rare thing to see on modern cars is a real big array of physical buttons to disable certain features. A lot of modern cars have a lot of these features on the touchscreen, which can be annoying and dangerous. So on the Swift, there's certain buttons down here. There's one for the engine stop-start, there's one to disable traction control, there's one to disable lane assist, and there's one to turn off the crash mitigation system. And there's even a load of buttons on the steering wheel. There's one button here, for example, to turn off the lane assist on motorways. Another rare thing to find on modern cars is physical dials for the RPM and the speed. And in between those 2 dials is a little screen for displaying digital readouts of certain things, such as the average torque and power used, the acceleration and braking, where the power is being used on the car, and also the digital readout for the speed. For such a small car, the new Swift has a surprisingly large amount of space for the backseat passengers. I've got this seat set up for my driving position, and I'm around 5'7" in height. And as you can see, I've got loads and loads of room here. We can actually move this passenger seat really, really far forward, as you'll see now. Elsewhere, there isn't that many amenities really for backseat passengers. There's one cup holder here, much like the VW Up, and there are 3 seats back here. This middle seat is going to be a little bit of a squeeze, and it's probably best suited to like short journeys or emergency situations. We've got electric windows in the back, and there's no heated seats, and there's no low-through hatch. It's all pretty bare bones, but what you have got is a really good sense of quality, even though the new Swift is quite a cheap car. So then, what's the new Swift actually like to drive? Well, pleasingly, I'm quite surprised. It's a really well-rounded package and a quite fun thing to drive at times, and it's just made me smile this week, and not many cars do that. The Swift has always been a popular car with new drivers, and this new one is going to be probably just as popular. Now, there are lots of things to do with the driving experience that are going to be really well suited for new drivers. For example, the clutch itself is quite light and the bite point is actually quite high up. Now, that might sound like a bad thing for experienced drivers, having the bite point so high, but I've actually on occasion tried to stall this quite a few times on purpose, and it just won't do it. For those new drivers who find stalling quite a scary part of driving, and for good reason, you're worried they're going to make someone annoyed. It's not going to be a problem. It seems to be really well geared up for new drivers. So also, the steering itself is really quite precise and light, and doesn't really need much effort to make it move, and it's also quite darty. The Swift also doesn't have much power on paper. It's around 80 horsepower. Now that might not sound like loads, but it's actually enough. This one's hybrid, so we've got a bit of boost in between the lag of the engine, and it provides enough power. Now, it isn't going to have so little power that it's going to make people scared to pull out of junctions and make sure they get up to speed properly, but it's not going to have so much power that it's going to put people in danger. I think it's a really good mix of drivability and a sensible amount of power to use on the road. Now, for experienced drivers, the new Swift can actually be quite rewarding to drive. It's got a nice thrummy 3-cylinder engine with about 80 horsepower. It's got a nice little 5-speed gearbox, which is such a joy to use. It's really smooth and really well weighted as well. And if you get out in the countryside, this thing is really good fun. It's such a shame that Suzuki aren't going to do a sport version of the new Swift, because the last generation version was top notch. It was really, really good. Now, fuel economy is one of those sections in a car review which I imagine some people just fall asleep in. However, the Suzuki Swift is returning 55 mpg on average, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised with that, because Suzuki quotes 64 mpg, and I haven't exactly been driving that economically this week, most of which I've just been egging it along B roads, and it's been more than happy to comply with me, and it's been getting 55 mpg. Now, what might put some people off about the new Suzuki Swift is the fact that this isn't a full hybrid like the MG3. This is still a mild hybrid like the last generation Swift. Don't let that put you off, because this drives really well, and it also returns really good mpg, and as you can see, it's quite good fun at any speed. Now lastly, I just want to cover the comfort of the new Swift. What's really good is, while this car is fun to drive, it's also incredibly comfortable. These seats are so spongy and just so forgiving, and really quite relaxing to sit in. And also, the suspension setup seems quite soft. Now, other cars of this class can be a little bit uncomfortable and quite noisy. And while the Swift is a little bit loud at times, it's nothing really to complain about. It's perfectly adequate for most use, and it's a really comfortable place to spend a journey. So what are my final thoughts on the new 2025 Suzuki Swift Hybrid? Well, generally, I've really enjoyed my time with this new car. It's been a really good thing to drive and really quite enjoyable and good fun. It's got an old-fashioned vibe about it, which is quite refreshing. The only really bad thing about the car is the infotainment screen. At times it can be a bit slow, and a little bit slow to respond to certain inputs and a little bit laggy in places. Positively, Apple CarPlay works fine, which is good to see, and that's really all anyone really needs. Now, if that's the only thing to complain about on a brand new car, you know that they've done a good job with the vehicle, really. So overall, I'm really, really impressed with the new Swift. They've really knocked out the park with this one, and it goes head to head with loads of its rivals, which is really good to see. The Swift is really well priced. It's got an adequate amount of power. It's really good on fuel, and it's relatively good insurance group as well, which is really good for new drivers. So I really do recommend the new Swift, and definitely go and test drive one if you're in the market for a little economic hatchback that's going to be a little bit good fun to drive too. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider subscribing to The Interface Cars. My name's Alex, and I'll see you again in the next one.